that the United Nations must remain the primary locus for political, security, and development decision-making, as it remains the most representative global body, despite its shortcomings. We believe a complete overhaul of the UN system is needed so that the UN Security Council is democratized and reflects the current balance of forces in the global system. It's unacceptable, 8 decades nearly after its creation, 5 nations.
Coming from a colonized background, can African officials ever be unapologetic about their opinions? We have witnessed many African leaders unable to express their feelings regarding the West. However, an Iron Lady from South Africa has gone viral for finally not being scared of telling the truth. Dr. Naledi Pandor, South Africa's Minister of International Relations, called out the most problematic actors within the United Nations Security Council, UNSC. She said what officials from even the West were finding the courage to say. But what problems did she highlight? And why aren't the new African officials scared of the West now? Let's find out. In international relations, where diplomatic finesse often takes center stage, one voice recently rang out with unparalleled clarity and courage. Dr. Naledi Pandor, South Africa's esteemed Minister of International Relations, made waves with her powerful remarks at the Dilemmas of Humanities conference. In a brief yet striking clip, she unapologetically called out the most problematic actors within the United Nations Security Council, UNSC. What specific criticisms does Dr. Naledi Pandor level against the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, in her address? Dr. Naledi Pandor delivers a comprehensive critique of the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, in her address, highlighting several specific criticisms. Dr. Pandor emphasizes the need for the UN system, particularly the UNSC, to reflect democratic principles. She argues that the current structure of the UNSC does not adequately represent the current balance of global forces. This lack of representation undermines the Council's decisions' legitimacy and perpetuates global governance inequities. One of Dr. Pandor's most pointed criticisms concerns the disproportionate power wielded by a select group of member states within the UNSC. She asserts that these 5 nations exert an outsized influence over decision-making processes despite representing a minority of the global population. This concentration of power undermines the principle of equal sovereignty among UN member states and hampers the Council's ability to address pressing global challenges effectively. Dr. Pandor suggests that the undue influence of these 5 member states leads to obstructionism and sabotage within the UNSC. By wielding their disproportionate power, these nations can impede or derail initiatives that enjoy widespread support from the international community. This behavior undermines the credibility and effectiveness of the UN as a whole, hindering its ability to fulfill its mandate of promoting peace, security, and development worldwide. Furthermore, Dr. Pandor implies that the current power dynamics within the UNSC are outdated and no longer reflective of the contemporary geopolitical landscape. She contends that the entrenched influence of certain member states, established nearly 8 decades ago, fails to account for the evolving distribution of power and influence on the world stage. This discrepancy renders the UNSC ill-equipped to address emerging global challenges and perpetuates a status quo that disproportionately benefits a select few.
Representative global body, despite its shortcomings. We believe a complete overhaul of the UN system is needed so that the UN Security Council is democratized and reflects the current balance of forces in the global system. It's unacceptable.
But who are the 5 nations Dr. Pandor refers to as wielding disproportionate power within the UNSC? And what impact do they have on global decision-making? Dr. Naledi Pandor identifies 5 specific nations that she asserts wield disproportionate power within the United Nations Security Council, UNSC. As one of the 5 permanent members of the UNSC and a global superpower, the United States holds significant sway over global decision-making. Its military, economic, and diplomatic influence allows it to shape international agendas and policies, often playing a decisive role in UNSC resolutions and initiatives. Another permanent member of the UNSC, Russia, wields considerable political and military power. particularly concerning Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. Its veto power within the UNSC enables it to block resolutions it perceives as contrary to its interests, effectively influencing global decision-making. As the world's most populous country and a rising economic powerhouse, China's influence within the UNSC has grown significantly in recent years. Its veto power and expanding economic and diplomatic reach allow it to shape discussions and outcomes on various international issues, from trade to security. Despite being a smaller player than the other permanent members, France holds significant influence within the UNSC, particularly in matters concerning Africa and the Middle East. Its historical ties, military capabilities, and diplomatic network afforded a seat at the table in shaping global decisions.
It's unacceptable, 8 decades nearly after its creation, 5 nations still wield disproportionate decision-making power in the Security Council, and those 5 number among the most problematic countries in the world, the causes of many of the problems I referred to today. So the overhaul of the UN system should include enforcement of decisions taken by what we hope will be a democratized UN Security Council.
As one of the oldest and most influential members of the UNSC, the United Kingdom maintains considerable political, economic, and military power. Its close relationship with the United States and its historical ties to former colonies further bolster its influence within the Council. The impact of these 5 nations on global decision-making is profound. Their collective power, reinforced by their permanent status and veto authority within the UNSC, allows them to shape resolutions, interventions, and policies that have far-reaching consequences for international peace, security, and development. Their decisions can influence conflicts, humanitarian crises, and global economic dynamics, often shaping the course of international affairs for years to come. As such, their disproportionate influence within the UNSC has significant implications for the functioning and legitimacy of the United Nations. How does Dr. Pander's message resonate with individuals and nations outside of South Africa, and what implications does it have for global governance? Dr. Naledi. Pander's message resonates deeply with individuals and nations outside of South Africa, transcending geographical boundaries and speaking to the broader aspirations for a fairer, more just world order. Dr. Pander's call for reform within the United Nations Security Council (UNSC) strikes a chord with people worldwide who perceive the current power dynamics as unjust and inequitable. Her message resonates with individuals and nations who have felt marginalized or disregarded by the UNSC's decisions. This resonation fosters a sense of global solidarity among those who seek greater representation and inclusivity in global governance structures. By highlighting the disproportionate power wielded by certain member states within the UNSC, Dr. Pander's message highlights the need for accountability and transparency in global decision-making processes. Her call for reform resonates with those who advocate for greater accountability of powerful nations and institutions, emphasizing the importance of upholding democratic principles and values in international relations. Dr. Pander's bold stance inspires activism and advocacy efforts to promote meaningful change within the UN system. Her message resonates with individuals and civil society, organizations committed to advancing the cause of global justice, human rights, and sustainable development. This resonance excites grassroots movements and mobilizes public pressure for reforms that reflect the interests and aspirations of the global community. Dr. Pander's call for reform within the UNSC prompts a broader conversation about reimagining global governance structures to better reflect the realities of the 21st century. Her message resonates with those who advocate for a more inclusive and representative approach to decision-making that acknowledges the diversity of voices and perspectives in the international community. This resonance fosters discussions about alternative models of global governance that prioritize equity, solidarity, and cooperation among nations. Dr. Pander's message carries significant implications for diplomatic relations among nations, particularly those that are members of the UNSC. Her call for reform challenges existing power dynamics and questions the legitimacy of decisions a select few make. This resonance could lead to shifts in diplomatic alliances and strategies as nations, seek to navigate a changing global landscape that demands greater accountability and transparency in decision-making processes. She also talks about the emergence of new alliances that are better than those of the UNSC. The first one is BRICS. The acronym BRICS represents an alliance of 5 major emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This coalition challenges the dominance of traditional power centers by uniting key players from diverse regions with growing economic and political influence. By leveraging their collective strength, BRICS countries seek to reshape global governance structures and promote a more multipolar world order. Then comes AU. The African Union is a continental union of 55 member states across Africa. While not a new alliance, the AU has increasingly asserted itself as a unified voice in international affairs, challenging the dominance of traditional power centers in shaping policies and decisions related to the African continent. Through initiatives such as Agenda 2063, the AU aims to promote African unity, sovereignty, and development, thereby reducing reliance on external actors for decision-making. Beyond global alliances, regional coalitions are also challenging the dominance of traditional power centers. Examples include the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN) in Asia, the European Union (EU) in Europe, and the Union of South American Nations (UNSC) in South America. These regional blocs provide platforms for member states to coordinate policies, address common challenges, and assert collective influence in global affairs, thereby challenging the supremacy of individual nations or blocs. But how can, according to Pandor, these alliances can be empowered? Dr. Naledi Pandor's message about spiritual empowerment transcends the domain of traditional political discourse, offering a deeper perspective on the potential impact of spirituality on marginalist communities. Dr. Pandor suggests that marginalist communities possess inherent spiritual power that can be harnessed to effect change in their lives and communities. This message speaks to the resilience and inner strength individuals and communities draw upon in the face of adversity and oppression. By tapping into their spiritual resources, marginalized communities can find the courage, determination, and resilience to overcome challenges and pursue their aspirations. Dr. Pandor alludes to the idea that spirituality is key to unlocking individuals' and communities' divine potential. She suggests that within each person lies a reservoir of untapped spiritual power that, when activated, can empower them to transcend limitations and manifest their true purpose and destiny. This message resonates with marginalized communities who may have been marginalized or oppressed, offering them hope and inspiration to reclaim their agency and autonomy. Dr. Pandor's message of spiritual empowerment extends beyond individual transformation to encompass collective liberation. She suggests that marginalized communities can harness their spiritual power collectively to challenge systemic injustices, dismantle oppressive structures, and create a more just and equitable society. This message resonates with social justice and liberation movements, inspiring solidarity and collective action among marginalized communities. Dr. Pandor's emphasis on spiritual empowerment challenges dominant narratives prioritizing material wealth, power, and status. Instead, she highlights the importance of spiritual values such as compassion, empathy, and solidarity in fostering social cohesion and collective well-being. This message resonates with marginalized communities who have been marginalized or oppressed, offering them an alternative framework for understanding their worth and potential. And how does Dr. Pandor's call for reform inspire individuals and organizations to take action in support of justice and equity? Dr. Naledi Pandor's call for reform within the United Nations Security Council (UNSC) serves as a rallying cry for individuals and organizations committed to advancing justice and equity on a global scale. Dr. Pandor's bold stance resonates with grassroots movements and civil society organizations that advocate for systemic change. Her call for reform within the UNSC encourages individuals to engage in activism and advocacy efforts to hold powerful institutions accountable and promote greater representation and inclusivity in global governance structures. Dr. Pandor's message fosters a sense of international solidarity among individuals and nations who share a common desire for a more just and equitable world order. Her call for reform transcends national boundaries and prompts collaboration among diverse actors to challenge entrenched power dynamics and promote fairness and transparency in decision-making processes. Her call for reform sparks dialogue and debate within academic, diplomatic, and policy-making circles about the need for fundamental changes in the UNSC and the broader UN system. Her message inspires individuals and organizations to critically examine existing power structures and advocate for alternative models of global governance that prioritize equity, justice, and human rights. Her advocacy for reform within the UNSC motivates political action at both the national and international levels. Her message encourages governments to reassess their approach to global diplomacy and pursue diplomatic initiatives aimed at reshaping international institutions to better reflect the interests and aspirations of all nations, particularly those historically marginalized or underrepresented. Her call for reform supports and validates grassroots initiatives to promote justice and equity on local, national, and global scales. Her message encourages individuals and organizations to take concrete steps to address systemic injustices and inequalities, whether through community organizing, advocacy campaigns, or policy initiatives. And what vision of the future does Dr. Pandar's courageous stand against entrenched power dynamics offer? And how does it shape our understanding of the possibilities for change? Dr. Naledi Pandar's courageous stand against entrenched power dynamics offers a vision of a future characterized by greater equity, inclusivity, and justice in global governance. Her advocacy for reform within the United Nations Security Council (UNSC) envisions a future where power is more evenly distributed among nations and regions, fostering a more inclusive and representative global order. Her call for democratizing the UNSC challenges the dominance of traditional power centers and opens the door to greater participation and influence for historically marginalized countries and communities. By challenging entrenched power dynamics within the UNSC, Dr. Pandar's message promotes enhanced global cooperation and collaboration in addressing pressing global challenges. Her call for reform encourages nations to work together in a spirit of mutual respect and solidarity, transcending geopolitical rivalries and divisions to pursue common goals and objectives for the collective benefit of humanity. Dr. Pandar's advocacy empowers marginalized communities by amplifying their voices and advocating for their inclusion in global decision-making processes. Her call for reform acknowledges the importance of ensuring that all nations, regardless of size or geopolitical influence, have a seat at the table and a voice in shaping policies and initiatives that affect their lives and futures. Dr. Pandar's courageous stand reaffirms the value of multilateralism in addressing complex global challenges and advancing shared interests and values. Her advocacy for reform within the UNSC underscores the importance of strengthening and revitalizing international institutions to better serve the needs and aspirations of the global community. Dr. Pandar's message inspires individuals and nations to unite to pursue a common vision of a more just and equitable world. Her courage in challenging entrenched power dynamics is a rallying cry for collective action, encouraging people from all walks of life to advocate for systemic change and transformative reforms in global governance. But why don't other officials say all this so clearly and bluntly to organizations like the UNSC? Other officials' reluctance to speak as clearly and bluntly as Dr. Naledi Pandor about the shortcomings of organizations like the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, can be attributed to several factors. Many officials may prioritize maintaining diplomatic decorum and avoiding confrontation with powerful nations, particularly those with permanent seats on the UNSC. They may fear the repercussions of openly criticizing these nations or the UNSC, such as strained diplomatic relations or backlash in international forums. Officials often operate within political frameworks that limit their ability to speak out forcefully on certain issues. They may face pressure from domestic constituencies or political parties to toe the line on foreign policy matters, including relations with other UNSC member states. Speaking out against entrenched power dynamics within organizations like the UNSC is risky, potentially leading to isolation or marginalization on the global stage. Officials worry about being ostracized by other member states or losing influence in international forums if they take an aggressive approach. Some officials pursue diplomatic channels and behind-the-scenes negotiations rather than public confrontation to effect change within organizations like the UNSC. They believe that constructive engagement and coalition building are more effective strategies for achieving their objectives in the long run. There may be cultural and institutional norms within diplomatic circles that discourage outspokenness or blunt criticism of international organizations and their member states. Officials adhere to these norms out of respect for established diplomatic protocols and traditions. Officials weigh the potential benefits of speaking out against the perceived risks to their country's national interests. They prioritize maintaining strategic alliances and preserving geopolitical stability over challenging entrenched power dynamics within organizations like the UNSC. Does this prove Naledi Pandor is courageous? Dr. Naledi Pandor's fearless stance against entrenched power dynamics within the United Nations Security Council UNSC showcases her unwavering courage in facing daunting challenges. While other officials may opt for cautious diplomacy, Dr. Pandor boldly and bluntly articulates his criticisms of the UNSC, undeterred by potential repercussions. In a world where diplomatic nicety is often prevail, Dr. Pandor's refusal to mince words is a beacon of courage. Despite the risks of diplomatic fallout or backlash from powerful actors, she fearlessly calls for reform within the UNSC, challenging the status quo and advocating for a more just and equitable global governance system. Her willingness to speak truth to power demonstrates a rare courage seldom seen in international diplomacy. By boldly confronting entrenched power dynamics, Dr. Pandor inspires others to stand up for global principles of justice and fairness. Dr. Naledi Pandor exemplifies courage in a world where speaking out against the established order requires immense bravery. Her actions serve as a reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, inspiring individuals and nations alike to strive for a better, more equitable world for all. Should her advice be worked upon, and why? Dr. Pandor's concerns about the disproportionate power dynamics within the UNSC are valid and reflect widely shared sentiments within the international community. Addressing these concerns is crucial for enhancing the legitimacy and effectiveness of the UNSC as a global decision-making body. There is a pressing need for reform within the UNSC to ensure that it reflects the current geopolitical realities and is more responsive to member states' diverse interests and voices. Dr. Pandor's advice contributes to the ongoing discourse on reform and highlights the urgency of taking action. Implementing Dr. Pandor's advice would promote greater equity and inclusivity within the UNSC, allowing for fairer representation and participation of all member states. This would contribute to a more democratic and representative global governance system. Reforms based on Dr. Pandor's advice could enhance the effectiveness of the UNSC in addressing global challenges such as conflict resolution, peacekeeping, and humanitarian crises by addressing the disproportionate power wielded by certain member states. A more balanced and inclusive UNSC would be better equipped to tackle these issues and promote international peace and security. Working upon Dr. Pandor's advice would demonstrate a commitment to multilateralism and global cooperation, values that are essential for addressing shared challenges in an interconnected world. By reforming the UNSC, the international community can strengthen the foundations of global governance and foster greater collaboration among nations. Do you think her advice should be accepted? What benefits will it bring to African nations? Let us know in the comments section. What do you have to say about this Iron Lady's bravery? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.